This is Remy Militello, and these are 5 short stories from Commaful, written by Artizi. It's a dangerous business following your feet. There's a voice your conscious mind cannot hear, but your unconsciousness sure notices it, every second of every day. It calls to you, it calls to us all. It's a voice as ancient as time itself, a voice that lurks us into darkness to its lair. Every city on earth has a corner no one should walk into, a place where screams go unheard and pain is no longer a feeling, but the only reality. People shrug at the crime rates around these areas and choose to make up excuses to feel safe. It's a bad neighborhood, they say. But do they hear the strange laughter whenever blood is spilled? Do they notice the eyes lurking in the shadow, always staring, always alert? No, they don't, and neither do you. If you are lucky enough, you'll remain blind and deaf to such horrors. Only your unconscious mind will ever know about it, and so this entity remains a mystery, an invisible sneer. You'll feel goosebumps in your arms, but blame your wild imagination. There's nothing staring at you from the dark corner, right? But what happens if one day your conscious and unconscious mind merge at the wrong time? What happens if your sanity begins to slip and you get a glimpse of the creature as old as time itself? You will finally hear its voice then, loud and clear, calling to you, hissing and whispering commands. It knows your name. It has always known your name. You'll know something terrible is about to happen when you hear it laugh. And no matter how far you run, you'll always find it, for it hides in every city, town, and village men inhabit. It feeds on your hatred, our violence, our crimes. It tastes our spilled blood even from a distance. It lurks, it waits, and it tempts us. It has nothing but time in its hands, and if you let your feet guide you, they will lead you to it. Are you ready to meet the being lurking in the depths of your nightmares? Just close your eyes and walk. Killing rituals. He went through his checklist, as he always did before going hunting. Though many men enjoyed the thrill of a good game, hunting down deers, ducks, or even going fishing, he had far more unique tastes. He liked the way people gasped and stared in horror before taking their last breath, especially if those people were women, pretty women. His rituals were peculiar, they always had been. Wearing black clothes while out hunting, making sure he shaved his hair off regularly to avoid leaving strands behind, yet never forgetting to wear a wig while in public. Keeping his nails trimmed was also important. One could never be too careful when making sure no evidence was left behind. That was why the clothes he wore kept any victims from potentially scratching his bare skin. No DNA left behind. He ran daily to keep himself fit, and when indulging in a special meal, it always would include one of those delicious meat cuts he kept in his freezer. Cuts one couldn't just buy in a butcher's shop. Rituals were important. They were what kept him from getting caught. After all, he seized his first victim when he was in his 20s, and now he was a week shy of his 50th birthday. His black, nondescript bag carried the essentials: tape, rope, knife, all store-bought, the same kind millions across America used every day. The smirk on his face as he walked out his front door was anything but ordinary. There was a darkness lurking behind it, the smile of a predator, a smile he only wore while alone. or when standing face to face with his brand new victim. It was killing time. All he was missing now was a pretty woman, and as he took a soothing night stroll through the park, he found one that perfectly fitted his requirements. I see auras. Up to a few weeks ago, I was a normal man. I had a normal family, a normal job, a normal life. I went to work, spent time with my family, would even watch a game with a cold beer on Sundays. Nothing out of the ordinary, at least until the accident, that is. That was when I began noticing a dim, strange color emanating from the people around me. At first, I figured there was something wrong with my eyes, but the doctors run a million different tests, and everything was fine. At least fine with my eyes. The car accident I had been involved in got me a nasty concussion and a fractured leg, but otherwise I was fine. It was when I was ready to admit something must be wrong with my head that I realized the colors seemed to have meaning. If someone was surrounded by a pink hue, they were happy, starting a new relationship. If it was pale blue, they were sad, dealing with problems in their lives. Gold, they were proud of something they'd accomplished. Bit by bit, I began asking questions and seeing it tied so well with the color I was seeing. Until I noticed my wife's aura, floating around her in a way most auras didn't move, like it was trying to hide. And it managed to at first, but now, as I grew more aware of, well, let's call it a gift. As I grew more aware of my gift, it couldn't seem to hide any longer. It was gray and stormy, and it took me a long time to find someone else with the same aura. I watched without daring make any assumptions until that fateful day. The day I saw a woman being dragged into the police station while on my way home from work. A woman, the news later informed me, had murdered her husband. The same aura, stormy, gray, dusty even. I checked the safety box in my office, the one I keep my gun locked away in. It's no longer there. I don't know what to do next. What if it's all in my head? What if I can really read auras? How can I be certain one way or another before it's too late to do anything about it? The owls hoot. The town is desolate. A faint red light illuminates the dark streets, where, a few days ago, the villagers walked without imagining the fate that awaited them. Only a single woman remains behind. Only she walks through the now deserted streets. She walks in silence, her gaze lost in the distance, focusing on nothing in particular. She doesn't notice the strong wind that surrounds her and makes her red skirt dance violently. Calm, silence, everyone is fled. She closes her eyes to enjoy loneliness. When she opens her eyes and slowly returns to reality, she notices how cold the evening has gotten. She trembles underneath her loose dress. Entering a large room, soberly decorated, she lights the fireplace. The flames make her shadow look longer, threatening. She can only hear the firewood crackling and the hooting of an owl in the distance. An owl hooting in the dead of night. Someone will die before morning arrives. She tells herself, remembering the old tales her grandmother used to tell her as a little girl. Someone will die tonight, and she is the only person left. She stands up, stepping away from the fireplace. She can't stand the thick silence anymore. The silence that she had longed for now makes her uneasy. Only silence, except for the ominous hooting. All of a sudden, though, something catches her attention. Could she truly have heard footsteps approaching? She runs outside the house, a young man walking idly around the ghost town, looking intrigued. He calls out to her as he steps closer, clearly relieved. "Everything is so quiet. Where is everyone?" Dead or on the run, she thinks to herself. Why does it matter? "Follow me. They're all in here," she murmurs somberly as she motions for him to go with her. The stranger hesitates, but in the end merely nods and steps toward the house she just rushed out of. She waits a few seconds and then walks after him, pulling out the dagger that hangs from her belt. Silence. She can no longer hear an owl hooting. The chessboard. My grandpa had passed away a few weeks prior. Being his only living relative, I had no other choice but to be the one to go through his stuff, and making the difficult decision of choosing what was to be kept and what was sold or thrown away. My grandfather and I had always shared a strenuous, complicated relationship. As my parents had passed away when I was a kid, I was forced to live with him from an early age. It wasn't that he was a bad man, he was just complicated and set in his ways. Having a kid rushing around the house he kept so immaculate ruined his daily life. Still, going through his things and sorting out what I wanted to keep was emotional, so I decided not to rush the process. I took a few days off work and began speaking with a realtor to potentially sell the house soon. The attic was my first stop, and I was surprised by how cluttered it was. My grandfather's house was immaculate, always pristine and tidy, but the attic was another story altogether. Sighing, I began moving stuff around, trying to make sense of everything he stored up there. That was when I saw it, covered with a glass box, the old chessboard set I hadn't seen since I first moved into Grandpa's house, over 30 years ago. He had stored it away in a huff about a month after my arrival, due in no small part due to my fascination with it. The pieces were so intricately carved, and I wanted so badly to learn to play the game, but he refused to let me put a finger on it. One day, he discovered me trying to grab one of the towers. He snapped it violently at me, and I never saw the set again. I figured he had just thrown it away. And yet there it was, set neatly when everything around it was in a state of disarray. I figured it was as good a time as any to do what my childhood self had wanted to do so badly, and remove the glass box, carefully setting it on the floor. I grabbed the pawn and moved it forward, setting it on the square right in front of it. The pawn felt surprisingly icy under my fingers, even if it was almost 30 degrees Celsius outside. I tried to move another piece, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how many I tried to move, they were stuck. I figured my grandfather had glued them all in place and forgotten about that one pawn. Shrugging to myself, I covered the chessboard once more and thought what a waste of a perfectly good set doing that was. I kept working all through the day and slept in my old bed that night. The following morning, as I stepped up into the attic, something immediately caught my eye. The chessboard was no longer covered, and a pawn from the other side of the board had been moved. I thought about calling the cops, but after making sure nothing else was missing and that all of the doors and windows were locked, I figured they'd call me a nutjob if I tried to explain what happened, so I returned to the chessboard, my hand trembling as I tried to move another pawn forward. Much to my surprise, I was able to do so with no further issue. Only once I set it down, it became impossible to move any other pieces. You can imagine how slow the rest of the day dragged on for me. It was dawn when I rushed into the living room the next morning, where I had set the chessboard after much deliberation. Lo and behold, another piece had been moved. I don't know if I should keep playing. I'm not sure what'll happen if I lose. Thank you for joining me for these 5 Commaful stories, written by Artizi and narrated by Remy Militello. I hope to see you again. Stay safe and stay spooky.